The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the sprawling Lagos mansion as Victoria stood in the marble-floored study, her hands trembling. 15 years of marriage had brought her to this moment, standing before a man she no longer recognized. Kwame Okonkwo sat behind his mahogany desk, his expensive suit impeccable, his expression cold as stone. Outside, the garden she had so carefully cultivated over the years bloomed in shades of crimson and gold. But here in this room, only ice existed between them. "I want a divorce," Kwame said, his voice clipped and final. "You have 1 week to leave this house. Take the children and go." Victoria's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Kwame, please. We could talk about this. What have I done? Why are you doing this? What have you done?" He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You have given me 2 daughters, Victoria. 2 useless girls. After 15 years, I have no son, no heir to carry the Okonkwo name, no one to inherit my empire." Victoria felt as though the floor had shifted beneath her feet. "Our daughters are not useless. They are brilliant children. Emma is top of her class, and little Zainab." "I don't care," Kwame cut her off, his voice dripping with disdain. "A daughter is a liability, not an asset. She will belong to another man's house someday. What good is she to me? I need a son, a man to continue my legacy." "Kwame, we talked about this when we married. You knew." "I knew many things," he interrupted, moving from behind his desk to stand by the window, his back to her. "I knew your family was poor. I knew your father was a schoolteacher with barely enough to feed his children. I rescued you from that life, Victoria. I gave you everything. This house, these clothes, this comfortable existence. And what did you give me in return? Failure." Victoria's legs nearly buckled. She reached out to the desk for support. "You're talking about our children as though they are commodities. They're your flesh and blood. They love you." Kwame turned to face her, his expression harsh. Love does not build empires. Love does not secure legacies. I'm a businessman, Victoria. I deal in results. And you have failed to produce the result I require." "There is a new woman," Victoria said suddenly, understanding dawning on her. "That's what this is about, isn't it? That woman you've been meeting at the office. Her name is Sienna," Kwame said coldly. "And yes, she's carrying my child. A male child, I might add. She confirmed it with the doctor yesterday." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. "You got her pregnant before leaving you?" "Yes. And I am grateful she could do what you could not." He walked to the door. "Pack your things. You and your daughters are no longer welcome here." Victoria stood alone in that marble study, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Outside, the crimson flowers continued to bloom, indifferent to the shattering of a woman's world. Emma and Zainab were only 12 and 9 years old. When the mother told them they were leaving their father's house, they wept in a way that tore at Victoria's heart. Emma, the elder, tried to be brave, but her face was pale as she helped pack their belongings into 2 worn suitcases they found in the storage room. Zainab clung to her mother. "Mommy, why is Daddy sending us away? Did we do something wrong?" Victoria held her youngest daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "No, my darling, you did nothing wrong. Your father he's going through something difficult, but it's not your fault. Nothing is your fault." They left the mansion on a Tuesday morning. Kwame did not come to say goodbye. He was already at the office, building his empire, erasing them from his life like characters in a document he could delete and forget. Victoria had no family to turn to. Her parents had passed away years ago. Her siblings had their own struggles and limited resources. She possessed only the clothes they carried, a small savings account, less than 50,000 naira, and the fierce determination to protect her daughters. The first nights were spent in a modest hostel, with 3 of them crammed into a single room. Victoria worked odd jobs, cleaning houses, washing clothes, doing laundry for other families. Her educated hands, which had once arranged flowers and hosted charity events, now scrubbed floors and wrung out fabric until her fingers cracked and bled. Emma and Zainab were enrolled in a public school, far from the prestigious private institution they had attended before. The other children teased them, and Victoria watched her daughters slowly retreat into themselves, their spirits dimming like lights being switched off one by one. 3 months into their exile, Victoria was at a market selling secondhand items when she spotted a help wanted notice on a community board. A boutique owner was seeking a manager for her shop, someone with style, organizational skills, and business acumen. Victoria's heart skipped. Before her marriage, she had studied business and fashion design at university. After marriage, Kwame had insisted she focus on being a wife and mother, and she had allowed her career to fade into the background. But those skills were still there, buried beneath the layers of disappointment and survival. She applied, and miraculously she was hired. The boutique, called Threads of Tomorrow, was located in a busy shopping district. It was a small but elegant shop with tasteful displays of traditional and contemporary fabrics, dresses, and accessories. The owner, a warm woman named Amara, took one look at Victoria and recognized something in her, a quiet strength, a hidden elegance. "You have good taste," Amara said during their first week working together. "I can see it in how you arrange the displays. You understand people. You understand what makes them feel beautiful." Victoria threw herself into the work with desperate intensity. She reorganized the inventory, redesigned the window displays, created a social media presence for the shop on her limited budget, and trained other staff members with patience and kindness. Slowly, business began to improve. Amara, seeing her dedication, began to pay her a small bonus from the additional profits. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Victoria to afford a tiny apartment for her and the girls, a one-bedroom space where they all slept together on a mat on the floor, but it was theirs. Emma began to improve in school. She had inherited her mother's determination, and she studied fiercely, as though she could prove through academic excellence that girls were not useless, that they had value. Zainab joined the school choir, her voice sweet and strong. The light slowly returned to both their eyes. Victoria's life settled into a routine of survival and small joys. She was poor, but she was not broken. She was alone, but she was not lost. And every night, she whispered prayers of gratitude that she and her daughters had survived. 2 years after Victoria and her daughters left Kwame's house, news began to circulate through Lagos society. Kwame Okonkwo and Sienna had married in a lavish ceremony that was covered in society magazines. The wedding was held the same venue where Kwame and Victoria had married 15 years earlier. But within months, cracks appeared in the marriage. Sienna had given birth to a son. Kwame had his heir. Yet instead of bringing him joy, the victory felt hollow. Sienna revealed herself to be cold and calculating. She had married him for his money, not for love. She spent his wealth recklessly, demanded constant validation, and showed no affection to him beyond what was necessary. Worse, there was Kelvin, Sienna's brother, who had come to stay in the mansion. Kwame had initially welcomed him as family, but over time, he began to suspect something was wrong. The two of them spoke in hushed tones. They exchanged knowing glances. And Sienna's brother had an unsettling familiarity with his wife that went far beyond sibling affection. One evening, Kwame came home early and discovered them in the guest room together. The truth crashed down on him like an avalanche. The baby was not his. The marriage was a con. He had been played by a woman he thought he loved. In his rage and humiliation, Kwame drank heavily. Late that night, driving through the rain, his mind reeling from betrayal and shame, he lost control of his car on a wet stretch of highway. The vehicle careened off the road and struck a tree. Emergency responders found him unconscious, alive, but barely. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital. When he was released, he learned that while he recovered, Sienna and Kelvin had emptied his secondary bank accounts and disappeared. They were never found. The scandal destroyed Kwame's reputation in business circles. A man who had been celebrated for his power and success became a cautionary tale. A man so blinded by ego and lust that he had handed his empire to thieves. 1 year after Kwame's accident, Victoria was promoted to general manager of Threads of Tomorrow. Amara, impressed by her work and seeing how her business had flourished under Victoria's care, decided to open a second location. She asked Victoria to oversee both shops and gave her a partnership deal, a percentage of the profits in exchange for her continued dedication. For the first time since her marriage ended, Victoria had financial stability. She and her daughters moved into a modest but comfortable two-bedroom apartment. Emma was accepted into a prestigious university on a full scholarship, majoring in engineering. Zainab continued to excel in school, her voice strong in the school choir. Emma looked at her mother one evening as Victoria prepared dinner in their small kitchen. "Mommy, do you ever regret marrying Daddy?" Victoria paused, holding a wooden spoon in her hand. "No, my darling. If I had never married your father, I would not have had you and your sister. And you two are the greatest blessing of my life. But he treated you so badly," Emma said, her voice tight with the anger that had never quite faded. "Yes," Victoria admitted. "He did. But his cruelty revealed my own strength. I discovered that I could survive without him. I discovered that I had worth beyond what he valued. He gave me pain, but he inadvertently gave me freedom. And I have used that freedom to build a life I am proud of." 3 months after Emma's university acceptance, a letter arrived at the boutique addressed to Victoria. The return address was Kwame's law office. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter written in Kwame's handwriting and a check. Asterisco Victoria. Asterisk, I will not make excuses for what I did to you and our daughters. My actions were unforgivable. For 3 years, I was a man consumed by pride and ego. I measured worth in terms that no human being should be measured by. I called our daughters useless, and in doing so, I revealed my own moral bankruptcy, asterisk. Asterisk, the accident that nearly took my life gave me time to think. In the darkness of the hospital, facing the possibility of death, I had nothing but my thoughts and my shame. I realized that the empire I built meant nothing. The success I had chased meant nothing. The one thing that had true value, my family, your love, our daughters, I had destroyed with my own hands. Asterisk. Asterisk, Sienna and Kelvin took from me what I deserved to lose. I do not ask for sympathy. I only ask that you know I understand the devastation I caused. Asterisk. Asterisk, I have enclosed a check for 50 million naira. It is payment for child support I should have been providing all along, and an attempt at restitution that can never be sufficient. I ask that you use it to give Emma and Zainab the futures they deserve. Asterisk. Asterisk, I have also spoken to my lawyers. In my will, I have left a trust fund in the names of Emma and Zainab, 10 million naira each, to be given to them upon their reaching the age of 21. They deserve to benefit from the Okonkwo name, regardless of my failures. Asterisk. Asterisk, I do not expect forgiveness. I only ask that you know I recognize my sins. Asterisk. Kwame. Victoria read the letter 3 times, her vision blurred with tears. She did not know if this was genuine remorse or merely the product of a man facing his own mortality. But she knew one thing with certainty. She did not need his money to validate her or her daughters. They had already proven their worth. She deposited the check, but she did not touch it. Instead, she placed it in a separate account, untouched, as a safety net for her daughters' futures. The money that Kwame had once withheld would now ensure their security, but it would not define them. 6 months later, Victoria received an invitation that made her heart stop. It was written in elegant script on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. Asterisk, you are cordially invited to the wedding of Kwame Okonkwo and Dr. Amina Hassan, to be held at the Grand Ballroom of the Lagos Continental Hotel. The ceremony will take place on Saturday at 2:00 p.m. Asterisk. We would be honored if you and your daughters would attend. Victoria stared at the invitation for a long time. Kwame was getting married again. After everything, he was starting over. She showed the invitation to her daughters that evening. Emma's reaction was immediate and angry. You cannot go, Mommy. That man destroyed our family. Why would you support his new beginning? But Victoria was quiet, thoughtful. Let's not refuse out of anger, my darlings. Let's think about what we want this moment to mean. The night before the wedding, Victoria and her daughters began to prepare. Victoria had saved money to purchase fabric from her boutique, and she had designed 3 dresses, one for herself, one for Emma, and one for Zainab. For herself, She chose a stunning emerald green gown that draped elegantly to her ankles. The fabric caught the light, shimmering like precious gems. Around her waist was a gold belt studded with small crystals. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, with gold accessories woven through. On her feet, she wore gold heels that elevated her to a new height of confidence. For Emma, Victoria created a coral pink gown with intricate beadwork. Emma, now taller than her mother, looked striking and mature. She wore her hair in long braids adorned with gold clips, and her makeup was subtle but elegant. For Zainab, Victoria designed a soft lavender dress with a full skirt that made the 14-year-old look like a princess. Purple flowers were woven into her hair, and she wore delicate jewelry that caught the light. When they stood together before the mirror, they were transformed. They looked like what they were, women of strength and beauty, survivors who had turned their pain into power. "We are not going to hide or to prove anything," Victoria told her daughters. "We're going to walk into that ballroom with our heads held high, as ourselves, as women who have built our own happiness." The grand ballroom was filled with Lagos's elite. The decor was elaborate. White flowers, gold accents, crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic light across the room. The guest list included politicians, business moguls, celebrities, and members of high society. Kwame stood at the altar in a tailored tuxedo, nervous and hopeful. Dr. Amina Hassan, a respected physician and widow with 2 adult children of her own, was walking toward him. She was a woman of his own age, someone who had also experienced loss and disappointment, someone who understood that second chances were precious. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with genuine emotion. When Kwame and Amina exchanged vows, there were tears in both their eyes. But everything changed when the reception began. The grand doors of the ballroom opened, and all heads turned. Walking through those doors, gliding across the polished floor with absolute confidence, were 3 women who seemed to glow with an inner light. Victoria Okonkwo, in her emerald gown, led her daughters into the room. The emerald caught the light of the chandeliers, shimmering and shifting with every step. Emma's coral dress was striking against her dark skin, the beadwork catching the light like tiny stars. Zainab's lavender gown made her look ethereal, almost otherworldly in her beauty. The room went silent. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that not Kwame's ex-wife?" someone asked. "Look at her. She looks like royalty." Another voice. "And the daughters, they are stunning." Kwame's face went pale. His hands trembled. Beside him, his new bride Amina squeezed his hand gently, already understanding without being told that these were the wife and daughters he had spoken about. The wife he had rejected, the daughters he had called useless. Victoria walked directly to her ex-husband. Up close, she could see he had aged significantly. There were lines around his eyes, a heaviness in his expression that spoke of hard lessons learned. "Kwame," she said, her voice calm and composed, "I wish you happiness with Dr. Hassan. I mean that sincerely." Kwame opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked at his daughters, Emma tall and elegant, Zainab glowing with youth and beauty, and he saw the women they had become. Not because of him, in spite of him. "Victoria," he finally managed, "I thank you for coming." "We came," Victoria said, "because Emma and Zainab deserve to see their father move forward with his life. We came because holding on to anger only poisons ourselves. We came because we are proud of who we have become." She turned to Amina. "Dr. Hassan, I wish you both a beautiful marriage built on respect and genuine love. That is something that will sustain you far better than anything else." Amina, seeing the grace and dignity in this woman, felt her heart warm. "Thank you," she said softly. "And thank you for the daughters you have raised. I can see they are remarkable." The guests watched as the 3 women moved through the ballroom. People approached them, wanting to know who they were. Victoria spoke with quiet confidence about her boutique business, about Emma's scholarship to university, about Zainab's plans to study music. Later, there was a moment when Emma and Zainab found themselves speaking with some of Kwame's business associates. One man asked Emma what she was studying. "Engineering," Emma replied proudly. "I'm working toward a degree in civil engineering." I want to help design sustainable infrastructure for developing communities. The man's eyebrows raised. That's impressive. Your father must be very proud. Emma met his eyes steadily. My father made his choices. My mother made hers. And we made ours. Our achievements are not about his pride or lack thereof. They are about our own determination. The words were spoken without bitterness, but with a clarity that made the man nod with respect. As the evening progressed, Kwame found himself searching for Victoria in the crowd. He finally found her on the terrace, looking out the Lagos skyline, the city lights twinkling like stars brought down to earth. "Victoria," he said quietly, "may I speak with you?" She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Of course. I've been thinking about you for the past year," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Since the accident, since Sienna and Kelvin left, I've had nothing but time to think about all the ways I failed you, all the ways I failed our daughters." "Kwame," Victoria began, but he raised his hand. "Please let me finish. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but I need you to know that I understand now. Emma and Zainab, they are not useless. They are extraordinary. And it is because of you. You took our daughters and raised them with love and strength. You gave them everything I could not, everything I refused to see they needed." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "You are right about one thing. Emma and Zainab are extraordinary, but not because I made them that way, because they have the resilience and courage that was already inside them. I simply gave them space to grow, and I never told them they were less than anyone else. I told them that," Kwame said, his voice breaking. "I told them girls were useless. I told them they belonged in the kitchen." "Yes, you did," Victoria said simply. "And that was cruel. But my daughters are stronger than your cruelty. They have learned that the opinions of one man do not define their worth. That is a lesson that will serve them far better than any amount of money or privilege you could have given them. Do you think," Kwame paused, gathering courage, "do you think they will ever forgive me?" Victoria considered this carefully. "Forgiveness is not something I can grant on their behalf. That is for Emma and Zainab to decide. But I will tell you this. Harboring anger and resentment only poisons the person who carries it. I chose not to teach my daughters to hate you. I taught them to move forward and to build their own lives. If one day they choose to have a relationship with you, it will be because they have healed enough to do so. If they do not, then you will have to accept that as a consequence of your own actions." Kwame nodded, tears streaming down his face. "That is more than I deserve." "You're right," Victoria said, not unkindly. "It is, but it is what I have chosen to give you anyway, because holding on to bitterness would only hurt me and my daughters." Over the following months, something unexpected happened. Emma, curious about her father's change of heart, agreed to have lunch with him. It was awkward and painful, but it was a beginning. Gradually, a tentative relationship began to form between Kwame and his elder daughter. Zainab remained more distant, but she was not hostile. She was protecting her own heart, and Kwame accepted that without complaint. Meanwhile, Victoria's life continued to flourish. Amara, the original owner of Threads of Tomorrow, decided to retire and travel the world. She offered to sell the boutique to Victoria at a price that was fair and achievable, given Victoria's promotions and bonuses over the years. Victoria negotiated a loan from a microfinance institution, and with the money Kwame had sent her, which she had been holding in trust, she purchased the boutique. She now owned her own business. Threads of Tomorrow was hers. She expanded the shop, adding a small workshop where she taught young women from underprivileged backgrounds how to sew, design, and create their own clothing businesses. She saw in these young women the same desperate determination she had felt when she was forced to rebuild her life from nothing. Emma completed her university degree and was offered a prestigious job with a firm that designed water and sanitation infrastructure for developing communities across Africa. Zainab auditioned for her and was accepted into a music conservatory where she would study vocal performance. Both daughters called their mother regularly to share their successes. They were building lives of purpose and meaning, lives that went far beyond their father's abandonment or approval. One day, Victoria received a call from Kwame. His voice was quiet but steady. I am writing my will, he said. I want to make sure Emma and Zainab are provided for after I am gone. I've already set aside trusts for them, the ones I mentioned in my letter to you. But I also want them to know that I am proud of them. I want to write letters to them, explaining my failings and my pride in who they have become. Will you help me? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I think that is a good thing to do, Kwame. Not for your own redemption, but for your daughters. They deserve to understand your journey, just as I have come to understand mine. And Victoria? Kwame's voice trembled. Thank you for not teaching our daughters to hate me. Thank you for that grace. I did it for them, not for you, Victoria said simply. But I hope you have learned from it nonetheless. 5 years later, Victoria stood in the garden of her own home, a modest but beautiful house she had purchased with the profits from her boutique business. The garden overflowed with crimson flowers, roses, bougainvillea, amaranth, the same flower she had loved tending in Kwame's mansion years ago. But this garden was hers. Every flower had been planted by her own hands. Every color had been chosen by her own vision. Emma, now married to a kind man she had met at university, was expecting her first child. She had designed a water system for a community in rural Nigeria that would serve over 10,000 people. Her father had attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony, and for the first time, she had hugged him without reservation. Zainab had just been offered a recording contract. Her debut album, featuring traditional African music with contemporary arrangements, had garnered critical acclaim. She had dedicated her first album to her mother, the woman who taught me that a girl's voice matters. Kwame had remarried Amina, and by all accounts, it was a genuine and loving partnership. They had become advocates for gender equality and had endowed several scholarships for girls' education across Nigeria. Victoria stood among her crimson flowers, her hands in the dark soil, and smiled. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain, the betrayal, the desperate struggle, the slow rebuilding. She thought about the moment she had walked into that wedding ballroom in her emerald gown, not to prove anything to Kwame, but to prove something to herself. She had proven that she could rise above her circumstances. She could build something beautiful from the ashes of her broken marriage. A text message came through on her phone. It was from Emma. Mommy, the ultrasound showed a girl. I'm going to have a daughter. I can't wait for her to meet her grandmother. Victoria's eyes filled with happy tears. She typed back, your daughter will grow up knowing that she can be anything she dreams of being. That is the legacy we will give her. She looked out at her crimson garden, at the life she had built with her own hands, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. She had been broken, and she had healed herself. She had been rejected, and she had learned her own worth. She had been called useless, and she had proven that she was invaluable. The crimson flowers swayed in the evening breeze, and Victoria Okonkwo stood among them, a woman who had transformed her pain into beauty, her betrayal into wisdom, her survival into triumph. She was not defined by the man who had rejected her. She was defined by the woman she had become. And that, she knew, was everything. This story is entirely fictional and original. All characters, events, and locations have been created for this narrative. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. This story is free from copyright restrictions and may be used, adapted, or shared freely. The themes of resilience, redemption, and the power of a woman's determination have been explored through original storytelling that stands independently from any other work.